welcome viewers to the 7th episode of S.A.L.T, Serving and Learning Together, a combined class project of the Master of Divinity second year and Master of Arts in Clinical Counseling first year, both students of Oriental Theological Seminary. We, the participants, are all students, and this is part of our learning journey under the course An Introduction to Pastoral Care and Counselling. Hence, this video is purely for educational and awareness purposes. My name is Mihimu Apon, and I will be hosting this episode on sex apart from marriage. Well, sex is almost a taboo to talk about in our society. Despite the growing need for having honest and open discussions, we are all shying away, but not today. Agreed that topics like this stir strong opinions and emotions because it touches personal values, cultural beliefs, moral perspectives, and also our religious convictions. In many cultures, ours included, sex is traditionally seen as an intimate expression reserved for the sacred bond within marriage. Yet, in today's world, more and more people are engaging in premarital, or for that matter, extramarital relationships, often without fully understanding the emotional, physical, and spiritual consequences that it entails. Of course, we are not here today with holier-than-thou attitude, but to open a respectful and honest dialogue. We will explore the reasons why people engage in sex apart from marriage, the potential impacts it can have, and how we can foster responsible choices and healthy boundaries. To take the discussion further, I have with me Juliet Holo, Sonny Bukat, and Longjati Longchar. And of course, as stated earlier, we are all doing our Master of Divinity second year here in Oriental Theological Seminary. So to begin our discussion, we are bombarded with sexual innuendos on almost every media platforms, almost every song that we hear. What are some of the perceptions that people have about sex?
Okay, before diving into some of the general perceptions about sex that people have, I would like to give a short note. The topic or this issue is such that we may end up using explicit terms or words that are adult related, and we can get uncomfortable and awkward sometimes, but I hope it is understandable. So, some general perceptions about sex. Sex today is viewed less as a moral issue but more as a pleasure between two people, which has led to an increase in the practice and acceptance of practices like premarital sex and extramarital sex. Also, practices like cohabitation, or which we generally refer today as live-in relationships, it has become so common that it is rarely criticized. And also, many people live with this false understanding of sex. They understand sex to do with intercourse, which has led to the normalization of behavior and practices of self-stimulation sex, to put it in words, masturbation, and even to the extent of promoting it as beneficial for sexual health.
Okay, so during the ancient days, the Greek viewed sex as food for stomach. And if we look in our modern times, we see that this sort of philosophy is also running in the same motion or in the same river. And when we talk about sex or how we view sex in our times, I think most of our understanding of sex has to do with the coming of modernism and postmodernism. With the coming of modernism and postmodernism, nowadays people view sex in such a way that it can be categorized under the environment of commercial lens. So if you look at people view sex these days, people see sex as something which can be bought, something which has a price tag. And so nowadays, if you look at Gen Z, the way Gen Z view sex, they ask questions about body count. And also, they use these Gen Z accented tones like red flag, green flag, all these things. So all of this, I think this has to do with their understanding of sex coming from postmodernism. And nowadays, when people seek for a relationship, most of the time, they're not seeking for a lifelong committed relationship. More or less, they're seeking just for a one-night stand or something to do with how much they can exploit that person. In that sense, their understanding of sex is such that it is very brief and very toy-like mentality, where they objectify a person and they don't see the person in terms of values. They don't see a person as though that person has intrinsic worth in them. Rather, they see that person as someone whom they can just use and throw it away. So I think that's one of the many general ways of people seeing sex or viewing sex.
People often hold different perceptions about sex, shaped by the culture, media, families, and personal experience. For example, sex is seen as a physical acts of satisfy desire or to prove love. Some views as a casual entertainment, something without much consequences. Some treat it as a taboo, a topic that is too shameful to discuss openly.
I think that's just an eye-opening statement that you all have made. You know, that one act of physical intimacy can have so many perceptions spanning across different cultures, even all the way back to ancient Greek society. So that's very educative. Thank you so much for giving us the general perceptions that people generally have about sex. But when we talk about sex from within marriage or apart from marriage, at least from Christian perspective, we draw our morality, or for that matter, our value from the biblical perspective. So please walk us through, you know, what is the biblical understanding of sex?
The biblical understanding of sex is very different from how the world views it. In Scripture, sex is seen as a beautiful gift from God. Right away from the very beginning in Genesis, we can see that God created man and woman, and the union was described as becoming one flesh. The phrase is more about than a physical intimacy. It's more about covenantal bond that ties two people together as one body, soul, and spirit.
Human sexuality is a design from God, and through our sexuality, we also express one of God's image as being created in His likeness. And so, in that sense, we cannot simply use sex just as the Greek thought, as food for thought. But I think sex also has a boundary, and that boundary is marriage. If you violate your sexuality to somebody else, then you're also not only violating yourself, but you're also violating somebody else. And in that sense, you're also violating the moral code or the moral law that God has embedded in human society. And so I think that's why the understanding of sex from Christian perspective gives a far more credible structure, and also it helps society to have a strong perimeter and boundaries for the society to really have this sense of morality and a sense of ethical grounding. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I think that clears up a lot of confusion, you know, especially in a postmodern world, as I stated earlier, bombarded by sexual innuendos left and right. Every picture, every song, every television, every advertisement that we see have at least one or the other sexual connotation. So, caught up in this kind of world, we seem to have forgotten this biblical perspective on sex, or at least the boundaries that God has set for sex. So thank you so much for clarifying it for us once again. I think as a people, as believers, we all really need to go back to the Bible and start deriving our moral values, and for that matter, even sexual practices from what the Bible actually says. Sadly, very sadly, in our society today, premarital sex, it is no longer a foreign concept, or for that matter, a practice in our society today. You know, so why don't you kindly highlight some of the contributing factors that is leading to the rise of premarital sex in our society today, and you know, the factors that contribute to this growing trend.
The internet, we all know it is not age selective, and it is a synonym for variety. I would put it that way. And young people today, they have the privilege, or we have the privilege of high-speed internet connection with complete privacy that is inside our own rooms. So, explicitly speaking, when young people are exposed to pornography or other websites that are related to porn, it leads to the fueling of sexual immorality highly. Another reason can be globalization. We can say that with globalization, it has led to an exchange of liberal sexual values across cultures. Like when we compare, our generation is one of the best informed or well informed about birth control and terms like sexual intercourse, masturbation, or other kinds of sex. So maybe not fully accepting it, but when we tolerate it, the space becomes very convenient for practices like cohabitation and adultery in common. Another reason would be young people, when they are with their peer groups, they are mocked at or laughed at when they are not dating or when they never have experienced sex. So it makes them feel inferior. So in order to be accepted or in order to have a self-identity among their friends, they get indulged in immoral activities. Another factor that leads to it may be the misinformation about sex, I would put it that way. It misguides youths to a large extent. Like, for instance, I've heard of stories about young people learning that if they don't get actively involved in sexual practices, like, for example, masturbation, not necessarily intercourse, their sexual organs, it will become numb and it will become useless. So it's funny, but those are misinformations. So young generation, we learn, most of us, we learn about sex from distorted media portrayals through movies, through shows, and maybe from our peers instead of learning it from proper parental guidance or biblically. So in other words, when sex education is not given properly, it leads to a diluted knowledge about sex, and which leads to an increase in the amount of sexual immorality. Lastly, since we are dealing from a Christian point of view, I find this factor as very important. We Christians, we are in a spiritual battlefield, and one of the strongest attacks from the enemies comes through sexual temptation. So when we don't fully rely on God, many people stumble, they mistake false information for liberation. And yeah, those are some of the factors that leads to marriage before sex. I'll put it that way.
Wow, I mean, that was really enlightening. Thank you so much. Knowing those contributing factors, I think, also goes a long way in helping us to be sensitized or to be educated, and also if we know the factors that contribute to it, then we are also aware of what to do and what not to do. So thank you so much for clarifying that for us. And I think, like you very clearly mentioned, in our present generation, sex has become so much like a commodity, you know, and even where people who are sexually pure are almost ridiculed. So thank you so much for clarifying that for us. Now, we know that God must have a very good reason for creating sex, and also we know that God must have a very good reason why He restricted sex within marriage. So having said that, you know, what are some of the emotional, spiritual, and relational effects of indulging in sex before marriage?
So that's a very thoughtful question. When we deal with this question, many people from different fields like psychology, even from our traditional roots, and also from theology, they have been talking about this issue of sex and how it affects a person from different layers of emotional, relational, physical, and also mental. So on an emotional level, as a person, I think sex is a very powerful gravity. It connects two persons not just from their physical dimension, but also in their mind and in their heart. They feel so vulnerable to that person when they have sex. And once they have sex, or let's put it, once they have coitus, they become so vulnerable that they see only that person wherever they go. It's like their whole mind, their whole being is already on focus on that person. So in a way, like, it creates this sense of vulnerability to that person. And without commitment, that person is left in confusion, or that person may go through emotional crisis. If sex, apart from marriage, happens to be that form of standard where they go in relationship, And I think secondly, if you have sex apart from marriage, or if you are in a relationship where sex is normalized, and your lover, let's say your lover and you are already separated, then it can also create in you that sense of guilt and shame. It can also raise a lot of questions about your values, about who you might be, and it can also create a lot of uncertainty for the future. You have already experienced this heartbreak, heartaches, and you have met these people who exploited you. So when you think about your future marriage, think about a long-term relationship, it can really affect those areas also. And when we talk about spiritual effects, not only does sex separates a person within themselves, where they feel isolated, where they feel separated, but also it affects a person from the above relation with God. When you have this sexual experience, or when you express your sexuality to someone else apart from marriage or before marriage, it also in a way detaches you from God, because for God, sex is sacred, and in that sense, you cannot simply use your body as something which you can where you can just exploit it, or where you can just simply just use it as a tool. But your body itself is made in the image of God, and so sex is also in that sense. When you engage in sex without having a commitment, or without having this covenantal agreement where the people witness you and your lover, when you do sex apart from all this, not only are you bringing shame to yourself, but you're also closing your eyes, you're also closing your heart to God. You and God become so distant that you don't feel the presence of God. Or let's say God does not make sense in your life. The only thing that makes sense in your life is to seek validation to other people, or is to seek that meaning, that values from somebody else. And when you follow that path, it becomes so much so that you engage more in sexual activities rather than seeing yourself as someone with values. So that's one effect of having sex apart from marriage, from a spiritual effect. So finally, from relational aspect, if you have sex apart from marriage, although initially you and your lover may be having a good time, honeymoon time, where you may be going for dating, you may be having fun out there, but gradually it brings trust issues. If your partner is out there going somewhere, you feel like he might be cheating on you. You have that sense of suspicions on that person. So without commitment, without strong grounding, it's more like you are simply floating in the air with no foundation, something like that, if you have sex apart from marriage. And also, not only does it create trust issues within yourself and within that person whom you are in love, but it also creates a sense of instability. Your mental, your emotional, your work activities, life, everything becomes unstable. Because in a way, like, you're always thinking about that person, you're always worried about that person, you always have this tendency to check on that person. So in whatever you do, you feel distracted. You're all the time feeling that sense of weight, where you have to know where that person is, you have to be informed, that sense of things. So in relational aspect, not only does it affect you and that person, but it also affects your families, your relatives, your friends. All these circles are affected because your relationship with that person is such that there's no commitment, there's no covenantal agreement, and there's this naive sense of love between both of you, and where sex is that ultimatum, where you share that connection between both of you. So when you build your relationship life in this area, it so becomes such that not only does it affect you, but it affects your whole being. So I think these are some of the effects that can happen when somebody indulges in sex apart from marriage.
Okay, just to add up to the spiritual effect, indulging in sex before marriage, it's contradicting to the Christian witness, and often it will lead, not often, but it will either lead to stagnation or decline of spiritual vitality. So in other words, unrepented immorality, it creates distance between an individual and God, and it hinders growth spiritually.
Well, thank you both so much for, I think that's very comprehensive analysis of the consequences of practicing sex apart from marriage. I think viewers at home will also agree with us that those are good enough reasons for us to be watching out for ourselves and to refrain from such, if I may say, immoral practices. So having said that, there are always solutions, right? There are always solutions to problems. There are always healing and restoration. So for people who are either practicing sex apart from marriage or dealing with the aftermath, what are some of the constructive and healthy ways that we can help them and come out of their behaviors? What are some of the healthy ways?
I think the question itself is very pastoral in nature, and also it creates this sense of care and compassion. That is a very sensitive issue, personally. And I think for those people who are engaging in such activities, or who are experiencing traumas, or who are experiencing guilt and shame from doing such things, I think we as a Christian community, first of all, I think we have to listen to them. I don't think we need to put that face of judgment or criticism. I think that may also be there, but I don't think we have to approach in that sense. They have already experienced enough within themselves. They have hurt themselves. They have experienced this enough. So I don't think it is good to judge them, but rather I think it is good to listen to their stories, and it will be so much better if we can give emotional support, not just sympathy, but be empathetic with them. Maybe spend time with them, and also try to encourage them. Try to give that sense of healing to their heart, to their mind, so that they may also see themselves not as merely as a person with the past, but also as a person with the future. That's one, and the another is the relational support. I think again, this plays a very critical role when we are talking about people who are suffering from all this. They feel isolated, first of all. They feel separated with their families, with their friends. Not only that, but they also feel that within themselves. They feel so separate from their mind and their heart that they feel that numbness. They feel as if like life is now has no meaning. Life is full of void, and I see no purpose here. Something like that. So I think in times such as this, friends, families, or even church communities who knows their problems and who knows that they've gone through this, I think we should not remain silent, but at least go and have a talk to them. Say something good, say something encouraging, make them feel that they're being accepted back, because that's how Christ has called all of us. We are all sinners at one point, and out of our dirt, Christ called us. So we need to have this mentality of offering forgiveness, offering healing, offering care, offering love before judgment, before.
To build Abu's point one, can offer compassion without judgment. Listening to these stories and reminding them of God's forgiveness and guide them towards healthier choice through prayer, counseling, and accountability. And also encouraging them to rebuild self-worth, set new boundaries, and focus on growth rather than the guilt.
In addition to that, just a general note. Yes, we need to be willing to face difficult issues, but keeping in mind that when the issues exceeds our expertise, like dealing with issues like physiological diseases, or when we have to face with malfunctioning or something to do with medical concerns, we need to be ready to refer. Referring, we need to accept, or we need to agree that referring in such kind of situation, it is not rejection, but it is the best step of support if it leads to the growth and if it helps the individuals.
Right. Thank you so much. I think as a community of faith, we all need to be looking out for each other and helping each other whenever and however possibly we can. So the measures that you have highlighted, I think will go a long way in helping each one of us to be watching out for each other. So thank you so much for those very healthy, constructive measures that you have given to us. And of course, the very important step is like to seek for help. An individual should not be ashamed to look for help if you are dealing with the issue. Well, as I stated earlier, we are not here with holier-than-thou attitude, but just to have an open, free and frank discussion on this very important topic, sex apart from marriage. So having said that, there are many young people out there dealing with sexual pressures in relationship. So what one word of advice would you like to give them for them to remember?
To the viewers out there, if you are one of those people who are facing these realities, who have experienced sex before marriage, or who is experiencing the aftermath or the after effect of having sex apart from marriage, I don't really know what you're going through, and I cannot really tell that I really understand or show that empathy that you're seeking for. But this one thing that I can tell to you is this: no matter where you are, no matter in what kind of situation you have gone through, God still loves you, He still accepts you, and He still longs for you. He's still inviting you to come to Him. You are made in the image of God, and in you there is this God component. Your mind, your heart, your body, your thoughts, your feelings, everything belongs to God. Doesn't belong to somebody who will just use it for their own pleasure, for their own means. But it belongs to God, and you are valuable. So always remember this, and always know that you are created for His purpose, for His will. So with that, I would love to encourage you to come back to God, seek Him first, and the rest will follow up.
Young people, or in that sense, we should know, as how our friends have stated, that sex, it is a gift from God, which is to be embraced and expressed within the marriage, but not to be as a tool used for acceptance or to measure our self-worth. We should remember, and we should keep it in our mind, that sex outside of marriage, or in that case, sex before marriage, is a sinful act, even if the couple intends to get married later. And we should also be reminded that when it comes to sex, it is not only about the physical acts, but it also has to do with the internal acts. That is the lust we have inside our heart, and it is equally sinful as committing a physical act of sex. And lastly, to remember, God has made sex to be relational, and so sexual activities that are self-stimulated, or in simple words, masturbation, it is also a sinful act, and it doesn't comply to what God intended to be. And lastly, and above all, we should pursue Christ-likeness in our living, keeping in our mind that true identity and true freedom is found in God's plan, but not in following or blending into the trends or pressures of the society.
Thank you. May your word of encouragement bring hope to someone who needs to hear it out there. Our society is evolving at a neck-break speed, and we are facing numerous new challenges and critical questions about our values, including sexual values. But as Christians, we have to remember that our morality comes from God, and that is not to be compromised at any cost. The purpose of today's talk was not to shame or contempt, but to encourage awareness, responsible decision-making, and respectful dialogue, both with ourselves and also with others. So thank you so much for being a part of this meaningful and much-needed discussion. Once again, this is S.A.L.T, serving and learning together on sex apart from marriage. And until the next time, be thoughtful, be responsible.